Welcome to Cheating Tales Diary. Before we dive into today's story, we have a humble request. Please consider subscribing to this new channel. Help us hit our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers. Your support will motivate us to keep bringing you more exclusive original cheating wife stories. And now, let's get started with today's story. Joseph Weller's car moved slowly through the quiet, empty streets of Seattle's northern suburbs. It was just past 7 in the evening, but the January cold had brought darkness hours earlier. The soft yellow of the streetlights shimmered on damp patches of snow. The air was frigid, but the chill inside Joseph wasn't from the weather. It was from suspicion. A quiet, creeping sense that something was wrong. He had just wrapped up a 3-day office trip to California and returned a day early. He didn't tell anyone, not Alice, not the kids. He'd sent his manager a short email. Taking early exit. Need to handle something personal. He tried convincing himself it was just homesickness, but deep down he knew the truth was something else entirely. He pulled into the driveway. The house, 2 stories of brick and wood, was silent, but one window upstairs glowed with warm light. And then he heard it. Modern music with a heavy beat. Not her style. Alice usually listened to soft jazz or kept the house silent. Whatever this was, it was new, loud, and wrong. He picked up his bag quietly, walked up to the porch, and unlocked the door with his key. Warm air greeted him. The heater was on. The soft scent of lavender candles filled the space. Once, that smell had been comforting. Tonight, it felt like a mask. The hallway was spotless, shoes lined up perfectly, the coat rack empty. He placed his bag down and looked up. Light poured from the master bedroom. The music thumped louder now. He climbed the stairs slowly, one step at a time, his hand tracing the wooden banister. Each step echoed in his chest. Then her voice. "Robert, just hang in there a little longer," Alice laughed. "Once the divorce is through, everything will be clean. The house, the savings, the kids." Joseph stopped cold. One foot just past the threshold. Yeah, he's still clueless. Predictable as hell. Comes home, eats dinner, kisses the kids goodnight. Never asks a damn thing. Then more laughter. The kind that once comforted him, now stung like acid. He stood frozen outside the door. Inside, Alice sat on their bed, her phone pressed to her ear, hair falling over her shoulders, her face glowing in the soft bedside light. "Just imagine," she was saying. "No more pretending. No more smiling when I don't want to. No more 'honey, I'm home' crap. Just us, finally." Joseph didn't make a sound, didn't move. After a few seconds, he quietly turned and walked back down the stairs. Each step slow and heavy. At the bottom, he grabbed his coat, picked up his keys, and walked out the door. No slamming, no rush. Just a man walking out of a life, holding his heart like it had just been carved out of him. That night, he checked into a boutique hotel in downtown Seattle. He didn't turn on the lights. He just stood by the window, watching the dim city blur through streaks of rain on glass. An ambulance passed. A couple strolled under the street lamps, hand in hand, but Joseph felt like the whole world had come to a halt. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Joe?" A sleepy voice answered. "Dave, I need surveillance, full, quiet, and I need a DNA kit delivered." There was silence, then a slow response. "Tell me everything." Joseph's voice was steady, cold. "Not now, just send the kit, and we'll talk tomorrow." He hung up, walked over to the hotel notepad, picked up a pen and wrote just 2 words. "This changes everything." He stared at them for a long while, then slowly set the pen down. The next morning, Joseph woke early, though truthfully, he hadn't slept at all. Outside the hotel room window, Seattle's winter morning was unfolding. Blue skies, light snow drifting down, and people sipping coffee along the sidewalks. He took a long breath, put on his jacket, and went downstairs to the lobby to grab a cup of black coffee. No milk, no sugar. Like the sweetness had drained from his life on its own. He pulled out his phone and called his security contractor, David Carlson, again. "Everything's set," David said. "2 cameras outside, 1 hidden inside the living room lamp. Voice recorders, 1 in the bookshelf, stairwell, and kitchen clock. You'll have a full report in 48 hours. "Keep it quiet," Joseph said. "I don't want her to know, not yet." "Understood." After the call, Joseph took the DNA test kit and drove it to a private local lab, carefully sealed samples taken from the kids' used toothbrushes and hairbrushes. All legal, completely discreet. Then he returned home. The moment he opened the door, Caspian came running. "Dad!" There was that innocent spark in his voice, that same joyful energy Joseph remembered. He scooped Caspian up and held him tight, like something precious, something fragile, something he couldn't afford to lose, whether the boy was his or not. Alina's voice rang from upstairs. "Daddy, you came early." Joseph smiled. "I missed you guys." Alice stepped out from the kitchen, hair tied back, coffee mug in hand, and a faint, unsettled look on her face. "Didn't expect you back so soon." "Things wrapped up early." She didn't ask anything else, and Joseph didn't offer more. The rest of the day played out normally. Dinner with the kids, Alice chatting about everyday routines, future plans she hoped to set in motion after the divorce. But Joseph, he was listening now, closely, every word, every detail. Not just mentally, but in a physical journal he'd started to keep. That night, once the house was quiet and everyone asleep, Joseph sat in his home office and played back one of the voice recordings. It was Alice's voice, crystal clear. "Robert, he has no clue. I even gave the kids your last name at the clinic. That way, no confusion later." Joseph's breath hitched. It felt like a blade between his ribs, but he made no sound. He played the clip again and again. Not to hear it, to understand it. Alice's actions weren't impulsive. They were structured, mathematical. This wasn't passion. It was design. The next morning, while Alina was getting ready for school, Joseph knelt to help her with her shoes. "Hey, sweetheart. Has Robert ever said anything about being part of our family?" Alina shook her head. "No, but Mom says he's going to help us a lot." Joseph asked gently, "How do you feel about that?" Alina looked directly into his eyes. "I like him, but he's not you." Joseph pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her. "You'll always be safe with me," he whispered. And it wasn't just a promise anymore. It was his mission. Caspian's words were even simpler. One evening during dinner, he said, "Robert says he can take us to Disney World." Joseph calmly asked, "Do you want to go with him?" "Only if you come too, Dad." Joseph smiled faintly as he looked down at his plate. But inside, another wall cracked. That same night, he sent an email to his attorney, David Carlson. Subject: Urgent, pre-divorce planning. I need to begin pre-divorce restructuring, change joint accounts, secure property titles, start custody framework based on upcoming DNA report. Quietly. David replied almost instantly. Noted. Proceeding discreetly. We'll be ready when the papers hit. The house had become a stage now. Alice was deep into her role, introducing the kids slowly to Robert's world. Outwardly, Joseph still played the calm husband, but inwardly, he had transformed into a strategist, a protector. One night at dinner, Alice casually said, "I think once the divorce is filed, we should talk to the kids about the new future." Joseph lifted his gaze. "You mean you and Robert?" Alice smiled lightly, but something in her paused. "I meant, whatever's best for them." "Then let's start with the truth," Joseph replied, his voice even. "They deserve that much." Alice didn't respond. Maybe for the first time, she suspected Joseph knew more than he let on. That night, an email arrived from the lab. Joseph closed the door to his office, sat at the desk, and opened the message. Subject: Alina. Paternity. 0.00% match. Subject: Caspian. Paternity. 0.00% match. He didn't close the screen for several minutes. Then slowly, he lowered the monitor and walked to the back of the house. Outside, snow was falling. The air was bitter. But on his face, warmth had returned, because now he held the truth. And it would change everything. 2 days had passed. The DNA reports now sat at the top of Joseph's file. 2 pages, 2 signatures, and 2 denials. There was no biological connection between him and the children, but emotionally, they were still his. The only difference was, now he had to fight for them against the lies and deceit. Alice still had no idea that Joseph knew everything, and maybe that's why she made the next move on her own. It was Friday evening. When Joseph returned from the office, a thick envelope was sitting on the dining table. His name was clearly written on it. Joseph Weller. He took off his coat and opened the brown folder. Divorce papers, neatly printed, stamped with the letterhead of Wright and Grant, LLP. As he flipped through the forms, he saw Alice had requested primary custody, alimony, half the house, and a 60% claim on the children's trust funds. And at the bottom, Robert's name was listed as a guardian substitute. Joseph closed the folder. No sound. He walked straight to the bathroom, splashed water on his face, and looked at himself in the mirror. His face was calm. He wasn't broken. He wasn't tired. But now there was direction in his eyes. In the dining room, Alice sat with a glass of red wine. She asked, "Did you see the papers?" "Yeah." "And?" "I'll sign them." Alice leaned back a little. Maybe she had expected a fight, some yelling, a meltdown. But Joseph's silence was far more unsettling. "That's it?" she asked. "That's it," he said. That night, Joseph called his attorney, David Carlson. "The papers are here. She filed good. Then we go full." Joseph began the next phase with David, financial restructuring. He froze all joint bank accounts, transferred his 401k and investment portfolios into a business trust, and had the children's education funds locked under state guardianship protocol, so Alice couldn't access them. The next day, he spoke with his company's legal team. Alice was removed from his private health insurance. Dependent claims were updated in office records. Property title documents were reissued. On the advice of a trust expert, Joseph reclassified the house as a temporary child-holding asset to block Alice from selling or altering any part of it until the court ruled. Joseph had now become a silent strategist. Every evening, he played with the kids, helped them with their homework, and every night, he added a line in his journal. "They don't know it yet, but they're about to be saved." One evening, Alice tried to poke again. "I hope you understand it's best for all of us. You and I were never meant to last. And the kids, well, they love Robert." Joseph looked at her, right into her eyes, and said nothing. That silence began to bother Alice, because now she wasn't talking to a passive man, but to a controlled calm that had already planned its next moves. That same week, Joseph met with the children's school counselor. He explained everything, calmly, without drama. "I just want them to be safe. Whatever happens in court, I want their lives to be stable." The counselor agreed, and an adjustment monitoring plan was initiated for the children. Alice was told it was school policy, when in truth, it was Joseph's safeguard. Now everything was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that comes just before a storm. The court date was approaching. Joseph's case file was ready. And in the middle of all this preparation, one question kept quietly stabbing at him. Was I just a caretaker for these kids? Or was I their father? The legal documents said one thing. The DNA report stamped 0.00% in cold ink, twice. But when Alina wrapped her arms around him after a nightmare, or when Caspian snuggled close in the morning and whispered, "Dad, you're warm," those numbers stopped meaning anything. One night, Joseph was sitting at the dinner table with the kids. Alice was glued to her phone, probably texting Robert about some new appointment. Alina spoke softly. "Daddy, what's divorce?" Joseph's fork stopped midair. He turned slowly to look at her and ask gently, "Who told you that word?" "Mom said we might not live in the same house soon. She said it's not my fault, but I didn't understand." Joseph looked at his daughter's face. So innocent, so confused, so lost. He took a deep breath. Divorce means sometimes grown-ups stop being married, but it never means they stop loving their kids. "Are we still going to be with you?" Alina's voice was quiet, but her eyes were stormy. Joseph didn't hesitate. "Yes, always." Later that night, Joseph sat in his office staring at the printed DNA reports. In front of him were baby pictures of Alina and Caspian, one where he had Caspian on his shoulders, and another where Alina slept peacefully against his chest. "I wasn't there when you were born," he whispered to himself, "but I've been here every day since." The next day, he told David Carlson, "It's not just about court anymore. I want legal adoption. If I win custody, I want their last names changed. I want them to be Weller, not just in my heart, but on paper." David paused for a moment. Then he said, "That's bold, but justified." Joseph nodded. "They deserve clarity. I don't want their lives hanging in uncertainty. If I'm not their biological father, then I'll become their legal one." That evening, Joseph spoke to Alice alone, not in front of the kids and not with anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked plainly. Alice scoffed. "Because I knew you wouldn't leave. You were the safe option. You loved too quietly." "Then why now?" "Because Robert said he can give me what you never could. Freedom." Joseph looked straight into her eyes and said, "You mistook silence for weakness, Alice. That was your biggest mistake." Alice chuckled bitterly. "You still think the court's going to fall for your emotional little speeches?" Joseph replied calmly, "I don't need speeches. I have records, and 2 children who run to me first when they fall." Before the court date, Joseph arranged private therapy sessions for the children. He wanted to prepare them, emotionally, gently, before anything became confusing or painful. "Alina," the therapist asked, "do you know what makes someone a father?" She looked down. "Someone who stays, even when it's hard." Joseph's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, they weren't out of weakness. He was fully ready. Before the final hearing, Joseph took one last step. He brought the kids with him to the county law office and helped them sign a document. Petition for paternal custodial claim and renaming right. Below that it read, "Requested new names, Alina Weller and Caspian Weller." It was a cold Saturday evening. Chicago's streets had their own kind of winter. The snow had started to freeze along the sidewalks, but inside Joseph Weller, something was melting. An old hesitation giving way to a firm decision that could no longer wait. Joseph had planned a special dinner. The venue? A restaurant that just so happened to be Alice and Robert's favorite spot. The same place where Alice had once introduced Robert to the kids as a family friend. The same place where she now discussed her future plans with him. Joseph had already spoken with the restaurant staff. The manager was an old client. A discreet booth in the back was reserved. A specific waiter had been briefed, and multiple hidden recording cameras were positioned to capture every angle. At exactly 7:08 p.m., Alice and Robert walked in, laughing, dressed in expensive clothes, their stride full of entitlement, like they believed the world bent in their direction. 2 minutes after they sat down, the waiter placed a small envelope in front of Alice. "Special delivery, ma'am." Alice looked up, startled. "What is this?" "Your truth," came a deep voice from behind. Alice and Robert turned, and standing there was Joseph, dressed in a black coat, a folder in his hand, and a calm face that now looked like a storm waiting for its signal. "Joe, what are you doing here?" Alice's voice trembled. "Ending it," Joseph replied. He calmly placed the folder on the table. Alice opened the envelope. The first thing inside, a photo. Her and Robert outside a hotel, holding hands, caught directly in the camera's gaze. Then another, a hotel room bill with both their signatures. And the third, the children's DNA reports. Robert snatched them up. The first line hit him like a match to gasoline. Subject, Alina, paternity 0.00%. Subject, Caspian, paternity 0.00%. Wait, what the hell is this?" he barked, looking at Alice. Alice couldn't speak. "You said they were his kids," Robert exploded. "That's why we waited. That's why we planned everything, so you could take the house, the money, the custody." Alice's eyes darted around the restaurant. A few tables had turned to watch. Someone had even pulled out their phone and started recording. "Robert, just stop," Alice whispered. "No, you stop. You lied to me, to him, to everyone." Robert stood up, his face now burning with both rage and shame. Joseph watched. For the first time, Robert looked rattled. He spoke quietly. "You two deserve each other, but you don't deserve the kids." Alice was flipping through the folder now and found the legal notice. It stated that Joseph had officially filed charges for parental fraud, a custody modification, and legal name change petitions. "Joe, please," Alice started. Joseph cut her off. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to inform you. The court date is set. The attorney's ready, and the story you built, it's collapsing right now." He turned to Robert. "And you? Don't even think about contacting them again. One call, one message. And I file a restraining order." Robert opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Alice's eyes welled with tears. Her voice broke. "You've destroyed me, Joseph." Joseph leaned down slightly, looked her in the eye, and said, "No, Alice. I just exposed what you destroyed yourself." He stood up, put on his coat, and walked toward the door. Some phones were still filming, but Joseph didn't care. As he stepped out, he looked at just one thing: a photo of his two children, rain-speckled on his phone's lock screen. He opened it, stared at their faces, and typed a message: "Be ready. Big hugs tonight." That morning, outside the courthouse, the air was cold, but the energy was tense. There were no media cameras on the steps of the Rainwood County Courthouse in Chicago. Joseph had intentionally requested a private hearing. This wasn't a spectacle. It was justice, delivered in silence. Joseph entered the courtroom in a deep navy suit, a leather briefcase in hand. His attorney, David Carlson, was already inside. On the other side of the room sat Alice, no longer the confident woman she once was. Her light makeup barely hid the anxiety on her face, and Robert wasn't by her side. That alone told everyone everything. Judge Julia Stone began the hearing. Her face was firm, but fair. A woman who had seen hundreds of divorces, but likely none prepared this thoroughly. "Mr. Weller," she began, "you're contesting the custody request filed by Ms. Alice Weller, and you've submitted evidence that both children in question are biologically unrelated to you. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Joseph answered clearly. "Yet you're seeking full custody?" "Yes." "On what basis?" Joseph opened his file and replied, "Because biology never raised a child. Presence did, integrity did, and love did." His attorney followed with the evidence. The DNA reports, surveillance footage, hotel records, messages and call logs between Robert and Alice, and school counselor reports showing the children's emotional stability under Joseph's care. Your Honor, Carlson said, this isn't just a case of infidelity. It's a case of psychological fraud, where the petitioner manipulated identity and guardianship of two children for personal gain. Mr. Weller didn't just expose this. He actively protected the children's emotional and legal well-being. Alice's attorney tried to steer the narrative back. Yes, mistakes were made, but that doesn't strip a mother of her rights. Joseph stood silently, eyes fixed on the judge. Judge Stone turned to Alice and asked directly, Ms. Weller, did you knowingly allow Mr. Weller to believe the children were biologically his? Alice's throat went dry. I wasn't sure in the beginning, but yes, I knew. Did you ever disclose that to him voluntarily? No? Did you at any point attempt to correct this? Or did you proceed with the divorce papers listing Mr. Weller as the father, with the intent to claim custody and financial assets? Alice lowered her eyes. Yes. The courtroom went completely silent. Judge Stone closed the file before her, then looked directly at Joseph. Mr. Weller, I've reviewed every document, every line of evidence. It's rare to see someone fight for children they didn't create, but raised with everything they had. This court not only recognizes your claim, but honors your commitment. Then she turned to Alice. Ms. Weller, you manipulated facts, withheld disclosure, and attempted to profit from a relationship built on deception. While your biological link to the children is not in question, your ethical standing as their guardian is. The ruling was clear. Full physical and legal custody of both children was granted to Joseph Weller. Alice was granted limited supervised visitation, only under the observation of a court-assigned monitor. No alimony, no asset claims. A no-contact order was issued against Robert regarding the children. As the hearing ended, Alice's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "You really did this. You took everything from me." Joseph stepped near her and said calmly, "No, Alice. I just stopped you from taking what was never yours to begin with." On his way out of the courtroom, he reached into his pocket and looked at a photo of his kids. They were no longer just his in spirit. They were his by law. The court had ruled. But Alice's loss wasn't just legal. It was personal, social, maternal. She didn't even look at Joseph again after the decision. Just once, as she exited the courtroom, she glanced back, maybe wondering if he still felt anything for her. But Joseph's eyes no longer held emotion. Only duty. A week later, Alice submitted a request for her first supervised visitation. The court approved it, at a public community center in a monitored family room where every interaction was recorded, every minute watched. Joseph received the notice and prepared the kids. Honestly, gently. No bitterness, no venom. "Your mom wants to meet you," he said. "And you get to decide whether you want to talk or not. No one's going to make you." Caspian, still young, nodded with a smile, but Alina's expression darkened. "Is Robert going to be there?" "No," Joseph said. "Then okay," she replied quietly. But her face didn't show joy. At the community center, Alice Weller was already there, locked in time, behind a rehearsed smile. The presence of cameras made her movements controlled. Her voice was laced with artificial warmth. "Hi, babies," she said, as if trying to stitch together something broken. Caspian ran into her arms. For him, the truth still meant hugs. But Alina stood at the doorway, silent, still. Alice opened her arms. "Come here, baby." Alina slowly stepped forward, but didn't move her hands. Her voice cut through the moment, sharper than any legal document. "You left us for someone else, and you lied about it. I don't know how to talk to you anymore." Alice froze. Her eyes welled up, but the tears no longer had power here. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Alice whispered. "But you did. Alina replied. Joseph watched from outside the room, eyes on the monitor screen. On it, he saw his daughter, the one who once called her mother the most beautiful woman in the world, now staring at her like a stranger. The monitoring officer checked the time. 15 minutes left. Alice panicked. Can I take them somewhere next time? Maybe the zoo? The movies? The moderator stepped in. That would require further approval. Today's visit is under supervision only. The request hung in the air, unanswered. In the final 5 minutes, Alice helped Caspian put on his hat. Then she turned to Alina again. Can I hug you? Alina shook her head. Not today. Joseph watched that moment closely and felt something shift. His daughter had just made the decision the court never had to. On the drive home that night, Caspian was quiet but clearly tired. Joseph let him fall asleep in the back seat. Alina stared out the window, silent. You okay? Joseph asked. Yeah, she said. But I think Mom was sad. She probably was, Joseph replied. Alina's voice softened. But sometimes, sadness doesn't fix lies. At a red light, Joseph glanced at her. This little girl wasn't so little anymore. When they got home, Joseph tucked both kids into bed, then returned to his study and opened the files again. Adoption papers, final custody orders, and the official approval for the name changes. Alina Weller. Caspian Weller. They weren't just his children now. They were the heirs to his name, his values, and his truth. For the first time in months, Joseph Weller could finally breathe. Not the kind of breath that comes from surviving a storm, but the one that comes from pulling your children out of a lie. Not just from a broken home. But the peace wasn't just on the outside. Inside him, something was still missing. And yet, within that emptiness, something new had started to take shape. The house was the same. The staircase, the dining table, the walls echoing with children's laughter. But Alice's shadow no longer lived there. And the kids' faces, they had changed too. There was less fear now, and more trust. One Saturday morning, Joseph took the kids to the nearby state park for a picnic. There, they met a woman, Serafina Clark, a former school counselor and an old friend of Joseph's. She had once been involved in protective counseling for the kids when Alice's deception had started unraveling. Their connection had always been professional, but something deeper had always been there too. Empathy and understanding. While the kids ran off to play, Serafina asked Joseph, "How are you holding up?" Joseph gave a small smile. "Stronger than I thought I'd be, but there are days I still feel like I'm trying to prove I deserve to be their father." Serafina looked into his eyes. "You already are, Joe, not because of a court ruling, because you never walked away." After that day, Serafina started visiting more often. She was easy with the kids, reading to Caspian, drawing with Alina. And Joseph, he began to open up for the first time in years. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Joseph and Serafina sat on the porch with warm coffee and the quiet breeze between them. After a long pause, Serafina said, "You don't talk about yourself much." Joseph replied, "Because most of what I had, I've already lost." Serafina gently whispered, "Not everything." Joseph looked at her, and for the first time, asked without fear, "You think people like me get a second chance at love?" Serafina smiled. "Number, they don't get it. They build it, brick by brick, just like you built everything else." And in those words, Joseph finally felt something take root, a belief he hadn't dared to hold in years. Over the next few weeks, Serafina spent more time with the family. She helped plan their kitchen garden, baked a cake for Caspian's birthday, and taught Alina how to play the harmonica. But most importantly, she never tried to replace anyone. She simply showed up and stayed. One quiet Sunday morning, Alina leaned into Joseph's ear and asked, Dad, is it okay if Serafina stays with us? Forever? Joseph looked at her, not with surprise, but with a kind of quiet clarity. Would you like that? He asked. Yeah, she feels like someone who won't lie. He kissed her forehead, and inside told himself, I'm not just a father anymore. I'm becoming a man again. Later that week, Serafina made it official, not on social media, but in the most honest way possible, in front of the kids. Caspian asked, Does that mean we can call her mom? Serafina knelt beside him and said, Only if you want to. Alina held her hand gently. Can I call you Serafina but still tell you everything? Like I used to tell Mom, before she lied? Serafina's eyes filled with tears. Yes, sweetheart, you can tell me anything. The house was no longer just a shelter of walls. It was finally a home, filled with hearts beating without fear. It was a cold, quiet November morning. The heater hummed inside the house. Caspian sat at the kitchen table, lost in his school project. Alina was outside, snapping pictures of fallen leaves in the yard. Serafina was baking, and Joseph Weller stood at the window, watching them all for a long, still moment. In his hand was a letter, creased edges, familiar handwriting. Alice Weller. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. Joe, I know I have no right to write to you, and maybe this letter won't matter, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not the kind of sorry that expects forgiveness, just the kind that finally admits it was all my fault. I lied. I manipulated. I turned our children into leverage. And now I'm sitting in a one-bedroom rental, wondering if the mirror will ever show me anything but regret. They don't have to see me again. You don't have to respond. I just needed to say it. Out loud. On paper. For real. Take care of them the way you always did. Better than I ever could. Alice Joseph folded the letter quietly and placed it back into the envelope. There was no anger on his face, no satisfaction, just a deep, quiet acceptance. He tucked the letter away in his closet, beneath the files where he had once secured his children's custody. That evening, Serafina asked softly, Everything okay? Joseph replied gently. Alice wrote. She apologized. Serafina didn't say anything. She knew. Some forgiveness isn't spoken. It takes time. The next day, Joseph spoke with the kids. Your mom sent a letter, he said. She said she's sorry. She knows what she did was wrong. Alina paused for a moment. Then she asked, Can we send her something back? Joseph looked surprised. Like what? Not a letter, Alina said. Just a picture of all of us, so she knows we're okay. Joseph's eyes welled up. Yeah, we can do that. The following week, they went on a picnic. Warm sunlight, Serafina's homemade snacks, and the kids' laughter filling the air. That day, they took a photo. Alina, Caspian, Serafina, and Joseph. All in one frame. A family. On the back of the picture, Alina wrote in her own hand, We're okay, and we hope you will be too. They wrapped the photo in a small card and mailed it. No name, no return address. Just a quiet truth. By the end of the year, the name changes were finalized. Alina Weller. Caspian Weller. Together, Joseph and Serafina repainted the walls of the house. Some old photos were taken down. New ones went up. Their first Christmas tree, their first family camping trip, their first blue ribbon at the county fair. One night, Joseph sat on the porch after the kids had gone to bed. Serafina came out, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. If you could go back, she asked, is there anything you'd change? Joseph took the cup, thought for a moment, then said, maybe one thing. What's that? She asked. That I should have known. Love isn't in the blood. It's in staying, when the blood runs cold. Serafina reached out and held his hand. No promises were made, no speeches were given, just a shared understanding. A quiet trust born not from words, but from being there. And that's where Joseph Weller's story ends. Not with a bang, not with revenge, but with truth. A story that began in betrayal and ended in something stronger. He didn't keep the blood, he kept the bond. And now, each morning, it's not just the sun that rises. It's a man who's learned how to smile again. The end.